Firstly, thanks for coming to listen about testing. Hopefully what I've got to share with you today will actually be really useful. It's a little concept that at Assurity I've helped develop, and it's really focused around that very beginning stage, probably as stated there. You know, we need to talk about testing, and that's pretty much where it ends. Oh, you're a test professional, fantastic, just get going. So there's pretty much two objectives I'm hoping to cover off today for you. And the first is really to talk about the value of testing. And anyone who has worked with me or knows me knows that I'm really passionate about the value of testing and sharing that value. And the thing I get most excited about is when someone re-quotes the value of testing as stated by me. So if you want to impress me, you know, when you're finished and you go and blog or tweet, get that value of testing in there that I've shared. And that'll just be exciting for me. And the second thing, probably even more importantly, is the simple framework, the concept that we've got that's really useful in that really early stage to try and help get you going and get you started. And start getting some of that information that's really important to be able to finish with something successful. It's called the 3-minute acid test, actually. So, let's get right into it. Armpit deep. And what I want you to do just sitting here now is just think about that word testing and think about what it means for you, what it sort of stimulates in your mind, you know, what are the things you do, and just ponder on that for me just for a moment. Not too long though, because then what I'm really now interested in knowing, just from a couple of people, is what came to mind. So I know we're not going to be able to pass the mic around right now, but if I could just have a couple of people maybe share what they were thinking when we talk that word testing. Don't be afraid or I'll pick you. Like this lady here in the green top. Yep, that's you, yes.
Predicting production.
Okay, great. We got someone else? Yes? Okay, cool. Nice. Anyone else? Yes, down the back. Right. Great, excellent. What I've heard a little bit of there is that execution of testing, actually doing something. You know, performing a test, running a script, all of that kind of stuff. What no one mentioned, and maybe you thought it but didn't want to share, I understand, was planning. The planning that goes into what you're going to execute. That thought process, that analysis of what you're trying to actually get out. But actually, more importantly, how you're even going to approach that thought process, that planning, then that execution. And that is probably the most important, is that actual approach to testing. How are you going to approach your testing? How are you going to approach the planning of it? How are you going to then execute on that? Because ultimately, what testing is about is providing information. So the real value of testing is the information it provides you. So what I want you to really think about for a second there is that when you're providing information, you're not necessarily executing a test. So when I'm talking about testing, I'm talking about the information I can give you that can help you make a decision about what you're going to do next. And what's great about this picture, apart from Google is fantastic for finding images, is this is literally what testing will do to you. Here you go, pick a plug, any plug. But unfortunately, you can only pick one. Which one? I can't really tell you what to do. All I can say is you've got to make a choice. And that is the power of testing, is providing that information. Now, if you think about it for a second, if you were actually getting close to the end of your delivery, and this is the information you got back, you're in big trouble, right? So if you're going to now execute this test, you're in trouble. Either you're going to be brain dead or just dead. So we tend to talk about test execution. So when, in my experience, I turn up and someone says, we need some testers, I go, oh yeah, I'm testing. They go, great, just get it done. You got 2 weeks, tomorrow, start. Bad time. All that's going to end is probably some real crap information about what I couldn't do. So we need to be thinking about all three of those. We need to be thinking about how we're going to do the planning of that, how we're going to approach it, What needs to go into that? What are the levels we've got? What is all that information that's going to be really helpful? And we've got to do that early. It's probably the most important thing to think about if you roll back to the value of testing as providing information, is actually being able to do that early. Because if you ponder this for a second, and if this is our project, and you're just calling me now to say, hey, can you come in and test? We're just about to land. Don't know if that's going to go so well. It's probably going to go really badly. I can almost guarantee you that those pilots, before they even took off this Airbus A380, the biggest plane in the world, had an approach idea. They sat down and they had a strategy and planned out how they were going to land that plane. They're not just landing it now and go, oh, cool, wheels down there, bit of trim. It's already done. It's just what we do. We just land planes, you know. So when often I get asked, come and do testing, I need you to test. I go, great, what do you need? Oh, we need a test strategy and we need a test plan. Not really very helpful. Okay, 2 documents, 2 artifacts. So what do you want on your strategy? Hey, you're the tester. You know, okay. So I need some way of being able to think about and bring all that information, because testing, and I'm sure a few of you have been involved in testing, maybe seen it go well. Funnily enough, testing always goes well. It's just sometimes the project doesn't. You've got to really start thinking about what's important. So this is probably a great description of the information that testing needs. You know, when I'm sitting down and I start thinking, right, okay, strategy, what have I got? I need to get, I need to know the scope, I need to know what test levels am I going to do, what techniques, you know, and I'm going to get into all of this kind of stuff. And this is a great mind map. You know, visual tools, fantastic, right? Absolutely fantastic. But I don't know about you, but if I turned up with this and you said, oh, testing, and I went, okay, no worries, here we go. Let's just start ticking off the boxes. Start providing me that information. You're just going to go, way too hard. Way too hard. And you can see this just in here. There's a lot of really good things that you need to be considering. But it's really hard to get here. It takes a lot of effort. There's a lot involved in trying to extract this information from people. Where is it? Where's it hidden? Can I get it? So it gets really, to be honest, as a tester, quite scary. It's probably the one thing that keeps me awake at night, is going into a new gig, to a new client, and thinking, oh no, I've got to start this whole education process. I'm going to have to teach them about that the value I'm going to bring is the information I'm going to provide them, so that they can make decisions. I wonder what this project's about. You know, far out, where do I start? They're going to ask me for a test strategy. I wonder if they've got a template. It'd be good if they've got their own template, because then I can just fill that in. You know, that'll take me 6 weeks. So what's happened is we've come up with a simple framework. Really simple way to start. Oh, I need testing done. Okay, great. Fine. Just answer me these questions 3. Now, I like the number 3 because it's really easy to remember 3 things. Really easy. The first one is, okay, tell me about your user interactions. How are those end users? Now, I'm not talking about your customers. I'm talking about your users. I'm talking about your internal users, your external users. All those people that are involved, or maybe things that are involved, that are going to be using your system, your project, your product, whatever it is. What are those interactions? Can you tell me what those interactions are? Secondly, what does your technical solution look like? Have you got an architecture diagram? Have you got any diagram? Can you show me a picture of what that solution that ultimately you're going for looks like? Hey, have you got one of your current state even? And then finally, what is the change that is happening? What is it you're adding? What is it you're removing? What is it you're going to change in there? Are you changing that current solution in any way? Are you just making a tweak somewhere? Great place to start. Now, I'll just ask you right now, in this room, how many of you have been on a project where you could answer those three things at that traditional sense of testing? Just think about that for a second. Now, if you'd asked these three things really early on, how helpful would that have been? You're all kind of quiet. Don't really like quiet. Has me all worried. Have I made any sense? Yeah? So this is where it gets good, actually, because that's just a warm-up. Because, of course, in this world that we live in now, what it's all about is, let's visualize that. Oh, geez. Let's now take those three things and let's see if we can do that on a whiteboard. Now, this is where the complexity gets taken away. You know what? Let's simply answer this. Can we actually do this on a whiteboard in a room? Who do we need in there to do it? So fortunately, pre-prepared, I've got a nice simple architecture diagram, okay? Nothing too flash about it. Keep it nice and easy. Can draw it on a whiteboard. Doesn't need to get into too much detail. Just, can you show me that picture? Next, those user interactions, okay? How do they now interact on that technology stack? Where do those users sit, and how is what they're going to do go through that technology stack? Now, already, there's a fantastic bit of information that's come out of this straight away, within seconds. Can anyone see it? And not these people on the front who've maybe seen this before. Don't be afraid, yes. Well, actually, I'm not even going to ask about testing. I'm just straight away saying, what is System C? What's it doing there? How come no users are interacting with it? Got no process there. Yeah, have we missed something, right? Have we actually missed a piece of information? You know, we could go away and find out that System C is our security system, right? It could be our LDAP server or our authentication server. Far out, you know what, that's pretty critical. We probably should understand how that interacts far better for our users. Or we may actually find out that that's just pointless. It's rubbish. It's just a bunch of waste that's sitting there in our environment that we could get rid of. Now let's put our change on here. Let's actually call out what it is we're changing, whether it be our user interaction or our technology stack. Where is the change sitting? And this is where it gets really cool, because funnily enough, regardless of your backgrounds in this room right now, whether you understand testing or not, you could actually now fully understand the scope of this change. You've got an understanding as a user, what it is changing, as a technology, as a developer, what's changing and how it's maybe going to impact you. Can everyone see that quite clearly? Yeah. Is there any questions maybe that you've already got coming out? Doesn't matter if there's not, it's okay. You can ask them later, save them up. What have I got next? So now, this is where this gets really good for me as a tester, as a testing person, because we could do this really early on. We could have this conversation at that ideas stage. Now, I really love listening to Jeff Patton downstairs. He just, it felt like he did a really good warm-up for me, I felt anyway. You know, the way he sort of talked about that middle bit of development, you know, we sort of forget the edges and the fuzziness. And this is the kind of place where you could, having this information, you could test out that idea. You could learn at this point. You could do it in a way and see how it's going to work. Now, why this is really helpful for me as a tester is I can straight away start talking about test levels. Now, I use the word test levels because in testing it's pretty well understood. I've taken away the word test phase because that suggests kind of quite traditional. But just the test level. What is the level of testing that is potentially going to be required to do this change? So in this case, we'll need to do some kind of unit testing in here. We'll probably need to do some unit integration type testing or component testing in there. Funnily enough, we maybe even need to consider system testing at that point. Now, this is really great, right? So if we go back to that whole strategy, hey, suddenly I'm starting to get some answers to some questions around scope. What's the scope involved? You know, I can then talk about system integration testing. You know, a lot of times system integration gets lost and forgotten. It gets wrapped up in sort of acceptance testing. But here I can call it out really, really simply and go, hey, here's probably the minimum amount of integration I need to do, to be considering. And then finally, of course, acceptance testing. Now, just as a matter of interest, how many people in here actually are involved in testing? Oh, wow. How helpful would that be to know that the day you walk in? Imagine being able to get these answers when someone says to you, I need you to write a test strategy. Hey, great, just got these 3 questions. It's only 3, should be pretty simple. If you're asking about testing, you should know the answers. Because of course now, what I can do with this information is I can scope out what needs to happen. If system D is a vendor, let's say, instead of saying to that vendor, you need to do testing, I can say to them, you need to do unit test, unit integration test, let's have a conversation about system testing. As a matter of fact, because we've used some terms that are industry standard, I could even tell them the techniques I'm expecting them to use and the kind of outputs I'm looking for from them. That information that they're going to provide to me so that I know they're delivering me some quality. So this is probably where it's quite interesting, why it's really quite helpful. As I've said, we've scoped out the test levels. We can assign out responsibility. You know, we can put some stuff on the vendor. We can call out the fact that there needs to be some integration testing as well as acceptance testing. And we can describe that to people in terms of what that means. We can talk about what those levels of testing mean and why they're different. Oh my goodness, my environment needs. Imagine that, early days, you're sitting there, you're having the conversation. Hey, got this great idea. Great, okay, let's talk about how's the users, who are the users' interaction. Oh, technical stack, what does your technical stack look like? What are you changing? Great, do my levels. Hey, you know what? I'm going to understand the environment I need for each of those levels at a point where it could actually get into the budget. You know, rather than getting to that end and going, oh, geez, how are we going to test this? We've only got one instance called dev. Data requirements, another big one, right? How terrible is that? How often do you get to that point, finally get that environment, hallelujah, and there's nothing in it? What do you need in it? Oh, I don't know, what's that system used for? Hey, we've had that conversation. We know that information. We know the interactions that are going to go through it. We can start thinking about the data that needs to be populated. We can assess the impact of change. So think about that for a second. In terms of, you've gone to this effort. You've got your understanding of your user interactions. You've done a technology picture. You've put your change on there. You're halfway through your project. Someone turns up and goes, oh, I just want to change something. Hang on a second. Where on my diagram, because you've done this visual, are you wanting to change? You can assess that impact now. You know, as the testing people, you're going, hey, hang on a second. If you're going to change that component, you're going to completely undo everything we've done. Do you realize the impact of regression testing? And I'm not sure if any of you have noticed, but I haven't once actually talked about methodology. Because you can run this concept, you can have this conversation at such an early point that after that, you could talk about the best methodology to use. Kind of cool, eh? No? Oh. I'm in testing, right? Anything's exciting. Giving me some information early is exciting. So let's just have a look at those development methodologies, because now that we've done that work in terms of scoping it out, we can actually apply them. And there's some great methods out there already. You know, if we're using the traditional model, we can use the V model. We can go and get the V model. It'll tell us, it'll talk us through how we're going to apply that, what that looks like. Suddenly, you know, our test plan and our test strategy is just getting automatically populated. Testing quadrants, another great tool to use. If you understand the levels you're needing to test at, if you can understand where it is your technology's at and how your users have been impacted. And what's great about the testing quadrants is as much as these aren't talking test levels, they're talking about techniques, right? They're talking about the test technique. Now, if you go and grab something like the ISTQB syllabus and you look up the test level, it'll tell you the types of techniques you can apply at that level. So suddenly, knowing the level of testing you're doing makes this really simple. It gives you a lot easier conversation to have. Hey, we're going to do system testing. You know, exploratory testing is a really good technique in there. Oh, hey, funnily enough, that's suggesting we do that manually. Great outcome in your strategy. You're planning your approach. You're talking about the testing you're going to apply. And then, of course, if you've gone to the extent of understanding that, you can use the automation pyramid. Now, the automation pyramid as it exists at the moment is generally just used off the back of the testing quadrant, right? Because, of course, the testing quadrant, I'll break that down for you, you can see it, talks about whether you should manually execute or use an automation technique. And, of course, the purpose of the pyramid is to talk about the level you're at and whether there's value in automating. So if you're at the GUI level or if you're at that UI level, it suggests that you're not going to get value out of automation. You want to try and at least get down to your API layer. Hey, guess what? We know that. We've done that. We understand those interactions. We understand those interactions across the technology, and we know where the change is sitting in our visual. Suddenly, actually, this cool little pyramid, when used in conjunction with the testing quadrants and then applied at a test level, if you're really early days, if you're actually working on something where someone's just got the idea and they've said, hey, can you come and ask me those 3 questions? They're really helpful. You could actually, early enough, be talking about automation and where you're going to automate and start looking at tooling options. As a matter of fact, you could assign the vendor maybe who's going to deliver that component to you. Instead of just saying, hey, you need a test, you can tell them the test levels you're doing, that they need to do. You could then suggest the techniques that need to be applied and that you'd like them to automate that, please. That would be really helpful, vendor, please. Can you tell I don't like vendors? I think they're great, actually. They love it when you give them this kind of information. Makes it so much easier for them. Does that all make sense now? Yeah. Have I said anything you hadn't thought of before? I'll take that as a yes. Now, that's all cool, okay? I've done it really pretty simply. But let's actually just sort of apply this. Let's grab something and actually and run through it. And you'll see why it works. Bear in mind, this is about early days. This is the kind of conversation you want to be having really early on. So if we look at a big solution, again, Google's my friend. You know, architecture diagram, bang, heaps. Now this, I don't know, for you guys, I'm looking at this, and I'm actually not really that technical. So this is kind of a bit confusing for me. Going, you know, not really very helpful. So if you roll back to what I talked about a little bit and what was in my bio, let's simplify it. Let's just make it really simple. Let's put it in a way that I could draw it on a whiteboard. Great way to constantly be thinking, can I draw this on a whiteboard? Now let's apply the user interactions, stick them across it, great. Put in our change. Hey, how helpful is that? Can you see down the back? We're going to change this a little bit here. Okay, hey, great. Oh, I wonder what that is. Oh, you know what? We could bring our complexity back in now, and now we can truly understand what we're impacting and how that's really going to change. Far out. At this point, we might even have that conversation and go, is there any value in this? What is the value that's actually going to be delivered to this guy down here? Maybe you don't make that change. Again, great technique. Now this is testing, providing information. We're not executing any tests here. This is our value. As a tester, this is our value. Hang on a minute, I've got 3 dumb questions. Can you tell me the answers? Yes, we can. Great. Hey, so why are we making this change? Where is the value? We're going to spend how much? Maybe we'll stop delivering features that are pointless. So, a nice simpler one. This is a pretty cool diagram actually when I found this, because I've actually gone to the point of numbering the interactions as well at a technical level. But again, still way too complex. So just simplify it down. Can I draw it on a whiteboard? It's a great conversation. A great question to ask. Can you draw on a whiteboard? Because if you can draw it on a whiteboard, then it doesn't matter if you're technical, business, testing, development, whoever. You're going to be able to walk into that room and understand the visual. You'll be able to ask some good questions. So again, let's put our user interactions across it. Put on our change. Again, nice and simple. Really easy to now understand what it is we're changing. And then, of course, we can bring our complexity back. Does it make sense? Seem a bit easier now that I've done it? So, of course, now that we've done all of this, we can have some really good conversations because we can start to get into change, right? So now that we understand the simplicity, we can leave our complexity there and we can just say, hey, you know what, I'm midway through my project. What do you want to change? Oh, we're going to make a change here. Right, okay. So if you remember back that what we were doing originally was over here, these guys are going to come and make this change. You're probably going to ask them not to, right? So, I don't know. I don't know if that's such a crash shot idea. Where's the value coming? Versus this one up here. Making a change up here, you're going to go, hey, go for it, go nuts. Absolutely no impact at all. How many of you have been in a meeting where you can make that kind of impact assessment call that quickly? Oh, cool. Did you use a similar technique? Yeah, right. So again, you get the gist of it. Put our change on. We're changing down here. You know what? Don't really care. Go for it. Go nuts. What I really like about this diagram as well is that because they've gone to the extent of numbering these interactions, it makes it really easy to apply an agile technique. You could really go down a Scrum path with this and build this. As a matter of fact, if you go down that path and you use the techniques and you get your automation in, you suddenly find that whether you're finished or not, and they come along and say, oh, we're going to change this, you can go, hey, great, no worries, just let me when it's done, run my automation suite, let you know if it worked, job done. Just as much as here, Funnily enough, now that we understand what we're doing, it doesn't matter where the change is. The ability to have the conversation about it with anyone in the room, in front of a whiteboard, to make that decision really quick. Kind of gone quite well, haven't I? Look at that, 31 minutes.